Number 10. Scott Pilgrim. Scott Pilgrim is a character that currently belongs to the publisher Oni Press. He is also a fellow Canadian like Logan. Of course, Scott just appears to be a young man without any powers at first glance, but don't be fooled. He has shown extraordinary courage and skill when it comes to defeating Ramona's evil exes. Now, I'm not saying that Wolverine would be an evil ex. Most of his exes are dead, to be honest, but he has also slept with quite a few people. I mean, every superhero saw a lot of action in the 90s, in my opinion. And Logan was no exception there. So it is possible that Wolverine might end up being a surprise evil ex that Scott could come up against. And if he did, I bet he'd track Scott down and surprise him, which seems to be a good way to have Scott defeat you. Matthew Patel ended up catching Scott off guard and as a result was handily defeated. As long as Scott doesn't have time to get inside his own head, he's a powerful foe. Number 9. Butcher. Billy Butcher is known as being one of the most feared men among his world of supers in the series, The Boys. If he came into the Marvelverse, I'm sure he'd have no trouble disposing of Wolverine just like he would any other superhero. While he may not have Wolverine's insane healing factor or adamantium-infused skeleton, Butcher is known for his ruthlessness, his cunning, and his ability to think fast. He is also astoundingly strong and agile. Combine this with the fact that he almost never backs down, and he would definitely be an indie hero who could defeat Wolverine. Number 8. Haunt. Haunt is the combined consciousness of two brothers, Daniel and Kurt Kilgore. Daniel is a corrupt priest who abhorred his brother, while Kurt was a spy and assassin who ended up dying as a result of his profession. Kurt, as a spirit, found himself accidentally combined with Daniel in his body during an attack on Kurt's widow, Amanda. Now combined, the two became the ectoplasm-fused and fueled nightmare known as the Haunt. With Kurt's secret agent knowledge and skills in their new Venom-esque and Spider-Man-like spiritual powers, the two brothers within one being are now super agile, super strong, and nigh invulnerable, making them the perfect match for Logan, even with his years of samurai training and experience. Number 7. DEATHBLOW. DEATHBLOW was first introduced in the comic Darker Image in issue number 1. He was created by Jim Lee and Brandon Choi and comes to us from Wildstorm. While Wildstorm is now an imprint of DC, when it was originally founded by Jim Lee, who is now the sole publisher at DC Comics, it was an independent publishing company. While many people think of Midnighter as Wildstorm's top dog right now, DEATHBLOW's introduction to the comics actually predates Midnighter, being introduced in 1993 himself. And while he is a Wildstorm character, he was actually introduced in an Image comic series. That's right, Darker Image was from Image Comics. Michael Cray was a member of the US Navy who later transferred to a special ops unit called Team 7. During his time with the team, they were exposed to the Gen Factor. Surviving, Cray didn't initially seem to manifest powers like the other team survivors, but years later his powers would surface. DEATHBLOW is a member of Stormwatch and has a regenerative healing factor and telekinetic powers, along with his years of combat experience. Number 6. The Darkness. What happens when you combine Witchblade and gargoyles? At least the feel of gargoyles. Such a good feels. Well, you get the Darkness. The Darkness first appeared in Witchblade issue 10 and was created by David Wall, Mark Silvestri, and Garth Ennis. The Darkness is an evil cosmic entity that embodies the absence of light, in other words, the dark void of chaos. Witchblade is also descended from the Darkness, but so is the power granted to Jackie Estacado, who is known as the Darkness in the comics. The power granted to him was passed on to him from his father, which became entwined with humans when the Darkness, after Witchblade's creation, started to possess humans. It was then passed on from father to son, with powers such as the ability to control demonic creatures, summon shadow armor and weapons, and the power to heal injuries, manifesting in its current host on their 21st birthday, with that current host being Jackie. Number 5. Supreme. Supreme is a character inspired by DC's Superman. He was originally created by Rob Liefeld, but has seen some changes as he's developed over the years. The character was originally a part of Image Comics' roster of supers, but he has moved around with Liefeld after he left Image and founded other indie publishing houses. The great thing about Supreme was that despite being a Superman-esque figure, his series was always somewhat more self-aware, poking fun at some of the typical historical superhero tropes. When Alan Moore started writing for the character and comic of Supreme, starting on issue number 41 of the series, he actually earned himself an Eisner for his reworking of the character. And his issues also included a lot of cool nods to comic book history as well. Number 4. Witchblade. The series Witchblade centers around a mystical artifact and the woman who is granted it after it abandons its current host, in order to save her and to heal her. This object is known as the Witchblade itself, and this woman is Sarah Pezzini, an NYPD homicide detective. The powers granted to her by the Gauntlet are the abilities to form weapons and armor using it, usually very provocative armor. The Witchblade also grants Sarah enhanced strength. Flight allows her to shoot energy blasts and grants her a healing factor. Witchblade was created by Mark Silvestri, David Wohl, Brian Haberlin, and Michael Turner. Number 3. Dream. While some might not consider Dream to be a superhero, in his own series Sandman, he definitely is. He is the one that we root for, and while initially he's a bit more of an anti-hero, throughout the comics he becomes more and more of a good and kind entity with the intentions of doing what is right, and taking into consideration how his actions impact others in a way that he wouldn't have previous to his imprisonment. Within his realm, the Dream Realm, he is all-powerful, and being one of the Endless, he can never truly be defeated. If he were to take Wolverine into his Dream Realm, and perhaps even if they fought on Earth, Dream would likely still defeat him. Now, whether or not you consider Vertigo, which was an imprint of DC, indie or not, is kinda up to you, but I like to think of indie as being anything that is not explicitly Marvel or DC. And while Vertigo is owned by DC, or was owned by DC, and there is some overlap in regards to characters there, I still would like to think of Vertigo as a smaller and indie publisher. And besides, we have to give it a nice little nod as it no longer exists anymore. Sad. Number 2. Rick Sanchez. Rick Sanchez appears in the Rick and Morty comics made by Oni Press. That's right, there are comics too. Zach Gorman is often the writer behind the comic series involving Rick and Morty. So not only can we now watch their adventures in the television show created by Dan Harmon and Justin Roiland, but now you can read about them too. They also have a ton of board games that are based in the Rick and Morty universe as well, and a lot of them are actually pretty good if you like board games. All the Rick and Morty, 100 years Rick and Morty, forever and ever Rick and Morty. If you know Rick Sanchez and what he is capable of, you know he would be able to come up with some kind of device or poison to kill Wolverine instantly. I imagine the whole thing would go down similarly to the episode where he kills the president's security guard with an instant death touch. Now, while Rick is more of an anti-hero, he saved the world enough times that I think we can loan him an honorary superhero title for the purpose of this list. He's definitely done a lot of good things. Sure, he kills a lot of people, but you know what? Sometimes you gotta do that. Obviously, if I were a superhero, I'd be an anti-hero. Number 1, Saitama. So, this one kind of depends on where the fight goes down, but if Saitama fought against Wolverine in his own story, like if Wolverine just popped up in the world of One Punch Man, Saitama would definitely beat Logan. In his universe, the whole point of his character is that he's basically the strongest person alive, basically an unbeatable Superman in his own world. Not that anyone will give him credit for that. In the world of Marvel, I'm not sure if he'd be as powerful, but I like the idea of Saitama battling the entire X-Men squad and just pretty much messing everything up. I'd like to think that people have enough respect for him in terms of fans, not in terms of his own world per se, that we'd accept him totally kicking Logan's butt. Just one punch and Logan's done. Number 10, Oliver. Oliver is from his own self-titled series of the same name. This series comes to us from Image Comics. He was created by writer Gary Whitta and artist Derek Robertson. In a post-apocalyptic world, young Oliver fights to liberate an England that is left in ruins following a nuclear-fueled world war. While this is all happening, Oliver also seeks to learn more about himself and uncover the mysteries tied to his own origins. This very different take on the Charles Dickens classic is a great series as well for anyone to check out that loves apocalyptic hero stories and a good mystery. Plus, is gorgeous. Number 9, Red Sonja. Red Sonja is a character whose property has belonged to a few different publishers over the years, but most recently she has found her home within Dynamite Comics. Sonja is a character who has always been well known for being a badass barbarian with flowing red locks who often takes to the field of battle clad in her famous chainmail bikini. While different runs have aligned her fighting style with a particular weapon, she is generally presented as someone who is skilled with pretty much almost any weapon that she comes across, and as someone who is quick to use whatever is at her disposal to fight with. She's beaten many foes with axe, sword, bow, and dagger as well as with her bare hands. Sometimes she charges her enemies and other times she stalks them in the shadows, but one thing is for sure, she is not a foe you want to cross. Her latest volume with Dynamite started in 2019 and is still ongoing. The Red She-Devil was originally created by Roy Thomas and Barry Windsor Smith for Marvel Comics. Number 8, Persephone/Laura Wilson. Laura Wilson is revealed as the reincarnation of Persephone in the comic series The Wicked and the Divine. She also happens happens to be the main character of the comic series and the narrator. The Wicked and the Divine is created by Karen Gillan and Jamie McKelvey. Laura herself is someone who idolizes and wants to be a part of the Gods group, who are all kind of like modern day rock stars in this incarnation. Through befriending Lucifer, aka Lucy, she gets closer to the group and later discovers that she is likely the goddess Persephone reincarnated herself. Her main power as Persephone allows her to summon vines and control them, which she can do like her fellow gods with a click of her fingers. And like the other gods, she also has performance abilities.
Up next, number 7, Dee from Rat Queens. Dee, which is short for Delilah, is a human cleric, an atheist, and a character who hails from a family of Lovecraftian monster cultists who praised a flying squid god called Nyrioth. Nagrioth? I'm probably saying that wrong. It's a squid god, so cut me some slack. She used to be the high priestess of said cult, but having become disillusioned by the horrible things her family worshipped, she left and began to travel on her own, which is how she met the other rat queens in the series. These days she mostly uses her magic for healing, but is also capable of necromancy, and she is skilled with a dagger. In at number 6, Snow White. Snow White is the deputy mayor of Fabletown, and is one of the main characters we follow throughout the series of fables. She was the first wife of Prince Charming before falling for Bigby Wolf and getting married to him. So, what is Snow capable of? A lot, actually. She's pretty bad. For starters, she's immortal like all fables, but her magical abilities are where it's at. She is a descendant of a particularly magical line, inheriting great natural power, and she reeks of elegant energies, according to Prince Brandish. She can conjure armor and weapons, and she can fly, which is pretty darn cool. She also has superhuman durability, which allows her to be virtually invulnerable. She's been shot in the head and has survived from it. In addition to that, she also speaks German, can manage the hell out of a business, and is an expert at fencing and knows her way around hand-to-hand combat. Moving on to number 4, Lucifer. The Wicked and the Divine is a really awesome series. It's a contemporary fantasy comic book published by Image Comics, highly influenced by pop music, and follows various mythological deities. So of course Lucifer the fallen angel is in it. Lucifer is the devil and one of the gods of the pantheon in the Divine and the Wicked. She's pretty impressive in terms of her abilities. She's a pyrokinetic, able to produce fires as she pleases, and the ability to cause foes to combust. She can also use the ability to cause foes to combust, create entire walls of fire, or use it with such precision as to destroy bullets. She can also use this fire as a force field to protect herself, and she has the ability to grant powers to an extent, and can teleport to the underground. Speaking of the Divine and the Wicked, that brings us to our next number.
Number 3, Vampirella. Vampy, as she is fondly known by her fans, has moved from publishing house to publishing house during her time in the comic book world. But she's also no spring chicken when it comes to her history as a hero. She actually first appeared in Vampirella issue number 1 in 1969 from Warren Publishing. Makes her, what, over 50 years old? Makes her over 50 years old, oh my goodness. Although now the character property belongs to Dynamite, who has created multiple Vampirella volumes since having her join their roster of heroes in 2010. Vampirella has more than one origin story, but the mainstays seem to be that she is an alien from the planet Draculon, where the rivers once ran red, and vampire-like aliens like Vampy once thrived, or that she is the daughter of Lilith. Or sometimes kind of both. Number 2, Bloodshot. Finally being given his own feature film, which was just recently released in theaters with Vin Diesel starring as Bloodshot, who is in this iteration going by the name Ray Garrison. Bloodshot comes to us from Valiant Comics, and is known as an anti-hero who is used by the corporation PRS, Project Rising Spirit, as a weapon. He either signed up or was forcibly used in an experimental process which put nanites in his blood, granting him a powerful regenerative healing factor as well as superhuman strength and speed. Unfortunately, his mind and his memories were also tampered with to help PRS effectively manipulate him and use him as a weapon. So it is still unknown if Ray Garrison truly is his name or another one of the many false identities implanted within his mind by PRS. Bloodshot was created by Kevin Van Hook, Don Perlin, and Bob Layton. Number 1, Hellboy. Hellboy was created by Mike Mignola and is from the series Hellboy out of Dark Horse Comics. He was just a little half-demon baby when he was summoned to Earth from Hell by Nazi occultists. Unable to bring himself to kill the young demon and believing he could probably be redeemed, Professor Brutenhold, head of BPRD, Bureau for Paranormal Research and Defense, took him in and raised Hellboy as his own son. Hellboy's spectacular stories involve monsters from all kinds of lore and cultures and are a fun mashup of horror, comedy, and action, while also having a sort of period feel to them as well. There's sometimes a very film noir feel in these stories.
And at number 10, Punk Mambo. From the Valiant universe, Punk Mambo is a series about a hard-living voodoo priestess, raised in London, relocated to the Bayou. A mystical mercenary for hire, often helping the wayward, troubled, and damned with what afflicts them, she does it for a price, often a steep one. Mambo, whose real name is Victoria Greaves Trott, is described as a street-savvy British punk with a rich cultural history of voodoo, and she battles the forces of evil too. So what is this priestess capable of? Astral projection, hypnosis, illusion casting, magic, duh, necromancy, longevity, she doesn't age, and unarmed combat. She also has enhanced senses. Neat. Next up, in at number 9, Blue Boy. Blue Boy is a character from Fables, a series published by Vertigo, which, yes, is owned by DC, but cut us some slack here, friends. The series features characters from fairy tales and folklore who call themselves Fables, and live in a centuries-old community within New York City after their homelands were conquered by a deadly and mysterious enemy known as the Adversary. Blue is known as a hero, and he was a former farmhand and warrior before becoming a clerk at the business office in Fabletown. And he's magical! He's immortal, as all Fables are, and carries around something called a vorpal blade, which can cut through most spells and enchantments. He also has a witching cloak which acts as an impregnable armor that cannot be burned, stretched, or ripped. It also has an endless personal carrying capacity and can give the wearer shapeshifting abilities. I mean, crap, hook me up with one of those please. Where do I buy on Amazon? And at number 8, Marco, from Saga. While Saga hardly feels like an indie comic these days, and is published by Image Comics, it's definitely by far one of the best and most popular series outside of DC and Marvel series. Saga is the story of a fugitive family struggling to survive a galactic war between the Wreath and the Landfall. Alana and Marco, our somewhat protagonist parents, were born on opposite sides of the war, becoming star-crossed lovers who have a child, Hazel, who narrates the series. It's a sci-fi meets fantasy, and it's got its fair share of magic. Marco was born on Wreath and has magical abilities that are quite unique. He has disintegration abilities in which he uses the ingredients of secrets to disintegrate hostile plant life. He can use binding spells to trap enemies together. He has healing abilities, but for healing big wounds he requires snow as an ingredient in the spell. Now that last one is something that he can only do to others born on Wreath if he needs to heal them. And he's also capable of electrokinesis, in which he can summon lightning strikes.
Number 7, Spawn. Spawn's demonic cape honestly itself would likely have a good chance of defeating Wolverine, especially in combination with his telepathically linked and early on somewhat self-sentient suit. But for fun, let's also talk about some of the other ways that Spawn could beat Wolverine. Other than his cape, suit, and chains, he also has super strength and speed. He's super agile, he's got necrotic energy blasts, is somewhat immortal, and can teleport. Teleportation alone is an insanely powerful ability when coming up against someone like Wolverine. I've always just felt like any teleporter, you could just teleport him away. Granted, Spawn can really only teleport himself, it seems, but who knows? Maybe he can teleport other people too. We don't know. Number 6, Korra. You might wonder where Aang is on this list if we're talking about avatars. I thought of putting him on here, but ultimately thought his pacifism might be a downside when it comes to taking on Wolverine. Plus, Korra is my favorite avatar. Aang could definitely restrain Wolverine indefinitely and possibly persuade him to stop fighting, but Korra has the potential to completely destroy Wolverine depending on what they're fighting over. She's more ruthless and a little more reckless when it comes to her fighting style, and I think this would give her an edge when it comes to taking on Logan. But then again, any avatar could defeat Wolverine. At their most powerful, they can control all the elements on a master level and have the avatar state, which basically gives them godlike power. So while not invincible or invulnerable fully, they don't really need to be in order to take down Wolverine. Not everybody has to be invulnerable to take down Wolverine, by the way. Number 5, Invincible. Speaking of invincible things, someone who could match and surpass Wolverine in regards to his abilities would definitely be Mark Grayson, aka Invincible from Image Comics. He's the son of Omni-Man, another superpowered being from the universe, which is why he grows up to become a superhero himself, sort of following in his father's footsteps. The story has some great twists, so I'm not going to spoil it for you. Instead, let's focus on Invincible's abilities. He has super strength and enhanced healing factor, super speed, flight, and invulnerability, making him a perfect match for Logan, as they have a similar power set. Also, it's established early on that Invincible can bench press at least 400 tons, so although they have similar power sets, Invincible is considered way stronger than Wolverine, who at his strongest could probably only lift a single ton, maybe 2 tons. Number 4, Divinity. Abram Adams is from the Valiant universe of heroes. He's a Russian astronaut who ended up getting cosmic powers that granted him the ability to warp reality and basically turned him into a god. When he, as Divinity, returned to Earth, he started to grant people's wishes for a brief time, and his fellow astronauts and comrades, Mishka and Casimir, even warped reality to create the Stalinverse. Reality warping powers are a quick and easy way to disperse of Wolverine, and while he does have some telepathic resistance, I don't think he'd be prepared for the likes of Divinity. The only thing that might stop these two from tangling is that Divinity sometimes prefers to avoid getting involved in conflicts, so he might choose to not engage with Logan depending on the circumstances. But still, if Logan was insistent, he'd probably just be like, "You gone."
Moving on to number 2, Frau Totenkinder. Frau Totenkinder is from Fables, and she's known as the Black Forest Witch. She's a powerful member of the 13th floor in Fabletown, the group of witches and sorcerers who provide enhancements and spells that keep the community safe and cloak the magical nature of its inhabitants from the outside world. Often her spells come at a steep price. She's been around since the Paleolithic era. Her natural form is a beautiful young woman, but she normally appears as old. Also, she passed away. She's the former leader of the 13th floor. So when she was alive and kicking, what could she do, magically speaking? Well, for starters, she was immortal. She used to sacrifice 2 children a year so she wouldn't age. That is intense. She was capable of precognition, witchcraft that allowed her to self-resurrect, create her own spells, including the death curse others, of course, magical energy blast, elemental manipulation, mind control, shapeshift, transmutation, portal creation, magical tool creation, and also had an extreme knowledge of all things occult. Yeah, not too shabby. And finally, and at number 1, ANANKE. ANANKE is the personification of inevitability, compulsion, and necessity in the divine and the wicked. ANANKE has immense powers and is considered one of the most powerful gods in the series. She is the one who acts as an advisor to the Pantheon, informs them that they are gods, and begins their incarnation. While she cares a great deal for the others, she always prioritizes the recurrence over the lives of the individuals. So, what can she do? She is capable of divine incarnation and bestowing powers, being the one who is in charge of each individual's ascension into godhood. She grants them the divine powers. She can manipulate and project energy. She likes to explode heads, and has a great deal of control over said power. She can atomize humans if she chose to do so. She can project force fields and siphon energy, and she's got an immense tolerance to pain. She's immortal, duh, and can split her consciousness into 2 entirely different bodies.